This story, the ANC has shown Carl Niehaus the door. This comes after he threatened to take the party to court for non-payment of salaries and UIF. The party says it will not tolerate insubordination. It is reported that Niehaus will be appealing his dismissal. Well, labor law-wise, what does this all mean? How will this be playing itself out? I'm joined now by labor law specialist Magate Phala. Magate, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View. Just first up, what was on top of mind for me? I don't have all the nitty-gritties, but this labor spat has been playing itself out in the public domain with the employer coming out and saying, we are firing you. Is that how you do it?
Okay, good afternoon, Dan, and thank you for having me. Look, let me begin by highlighting the following, that a detailed definition of dismissal is outlined in terms of Section 186, subsection 1 of the Labour Relations Act, which provides that dismissal means a termination of employment by the employer with or without notice. So now there are two requirements then for a dismissal to be fair, because the Labour Relations Act places an emphasis on the principle of fairness rather than unlawfulness, illegality, and so forth. So these two requirements are that firstly, the dismissal must be fair. In other words, the employer must have a fair reason to dismiss an employee, and those fair reasons, one of them is misconduct, which is the case with regards to Mr. Carl Niehaus. And the second requirement is the procedural fairness, which is derived from a common law principle of Audi Alderam Patem rule, which means that before an employer can dismiss an employee, the employer is required to follow a fair procedure. So now, what is a fair procedure? A fair procedure means that the employer is required to notify the employee of the allegations of misconduct and afford this employee an opportunity to respond to those allegations. And thereafter, a decision can be made whether to dismiss or not to dismiss such an employee.
Yeah, so Magate, there's an issue of fairness on the offense that is allegedly been committed, in this case misconduct, and also fairness in terms of the procedure. In this case, from a Labour Relations Act perspective, has the ANC got it right as the employer?
Technically, yes. I will deliberately use the word technically, because the ideal situation should have been that ANC should have issued Mr. Carl Niehaus with the notice to attend a disciplinary hearing, a formal disciplinary hearing with clear charges of misconduct. And in that notice, the rights of Mr. Carl Niehaus ought to have been outlined. The right to be present in the hearing, to be represented by a trade union official or a fellow employee, the right to state his case, the right to pose questions or cross-examine the witnesses of the employer, and then if found guilty, the right to plead in mitigation. Yes.
Yeah, so in this case, we are not aware if that has happened. We just saw the public statement. So Mr. Niehaus has got some rights that he could use to argue against his dismissal. And if he loses, should he expect fair remuneration?
Yes, in terms of Section 193 of the Labour Relations Act, if an employee, a dismissed employee who has referred a dispute to either to the CCMA or a bargaining council with a jurisdiction, the commissioner in that forum may award compensation or may reinstate or re-employ that employee, depending on how that dismissal is unfair. If the dismissal is unfair because the employer did not have a fair reason then the commissioner may order the reinstatement or reemployment. And then if the dismissal is substantively fair, in other words, the employer had a fair reason but did not follow a fair procedure, so the only thing that is unfair there is procedural fairness, then the commissioner cannot reinstate or reemploy the employee. What the commissioner can do is just to award some compensation which should be less than 12 months of the employee's monthly salary.
That was the word. I didn't mean remuneration, compensation. We'll have to watch and see this one, Magate Phala, how it's going to play itself out. It came out to the public, but I mean, matters between the employer and the employee are normally tended to be dealt with in a confidential space. But this ANC spat between an employee, Carl Niehaus, and employer, African National Congress, is out in the public space. Thank you very much, Magate Phala, for some of the insights. Of course,